guys, it's Chris from Ocean Pro, back here again today talking about the accessory engine stop and start switch that is used with some applications of the revolver throttle like the GSXR Suzuki models. When you are installing the switch onto a motorcycle, you have to wire the switch to fit into the stock harness. What that generally means is disassembling the stock connector off of the stock switch and then assembling that connector onto the aftermarket Motion Pro switch so that it will function with the stock harness. This is the simplest, safest, and most secure way of installing this switch onto your motorcycle. Installing a switch and doing these modifications is somewhat complex and is also very important from a safety standpoint. If you make a mistake or there is an assembly problem with your work, you could potentially cause your bike to shut off while you're riding it and cause all sorts of potential problems. So if you're not 100% sure that you can do this job from start to finish 100%, always seek out the assistance of an experienced professional technician to make sure the job is done right the first time. The tools that we're going to use for this assembly are relatively straightforward. There's not a whole lot of complex stuff that you need. In determining the function of your stock switch, you need to have a multimeter and know how to use it in a ohm setting so that you can check continuity and discontinuity. You'll need some tools to disassemble the stock connectors. A pick or a very small screwdriver. The stock connectors have a small tab that hold the terminals in place, and so you need to get in there to release the tab. Small cutters to cut the connector off of the new switch, and then a pair of crimping pliers to attach the new terminals onto the new accessory switch. One other thing that you're going to need here that we don't have right in front of us is a piece of paper and a pen, because you're going to need to draw a drawing that illustrates where all of the stock wires are in their stock positions and what those wires do so that you can keep track. If you don't know that, then you will have a problem later and you won't know how to reassemble. So make sure that you always make a lot of notes with the disassembly of the switch so that you can know where you're at all times. First step is always to determine the position of the wires in the stock switch and to determine what those wires do. So it's always easiest to make a drawing from the back side of the switch. I use the little clip as an indicator of position, and we have 8 wires. Seven. One empty spot. So orange, red, what is that one? Black and blue. Empty space. Black and red. Yellow, white. The two colors that I'm talking about are the main color of the wire and then the stripe color. So yellow, green, orange and white, and orange and black. So now, in case something goes wrong, we know how to, at the very least, put the stock switch back together. Smart. Sometimes you can see all of the wires from inside the switch without having to disassemble it, but sometimes you have to pull parts of the switch apart to be able to see the wires. Just keep track of all of the parts that you take out, and What is being stubborn? Never force anything. Always take your time to look at stuff. There we go. The start-stop switch is orange and white and orange and black. And so these two here are the start-stop. Now, something that also makes this really easy, because the switch has incorporated into it the brake light wires. Now, the brake light wires on a track bike, like what we're installing today, aren't used. Don't have a brake light on the track bike, so we don't have to worry about these, so we can eliminate them from our drawing right away. So we've got black and blue and black and red, so we can get rid of that one, and we can get rid of that one, and that's one less thing that we have to worry about. Now that you can see the start and stop switch, I see that there is an orange and white wire here also, same as the on and off switch. Because these switches are simply continuity switches, they're closed or open, the orange and white is most likely a common wire between the two, so that we have a single orange and white wire here, and then two here where it splits somewhere inside. We can test that with our multimeter. I set it just to beep when it has continuity, so I don't have to bother looking at the display. So here's the start switch. Yep. And here's the on and off switch. Yep, they're common. So we can file that away for later. The starter switch is a little more complex, where it has one side that's, when the switch is at rest, one side that's normally closed, which controls the headlights, and one side that's normally open, which controls the starter. So when the switch is not pushed in, your headlights are on and your starter is not running. So the headlights are closed, starter is open. When you push the switch in, the headlight side goes open, so the headlights turn off, the starter side closes so that the starter starts. That's how this works, and that's why your headlight goes off when you start your motorcycle. Now, since this is a track motorcycle, the only thing that we have to worry about, because there's no headlight on here, the only thing we have to worry about is the starter circuit itself. So with the starter circuit, all we have to worry about is two wires, the orange and white, and the yellow and green, to control the starter on our track motorcycle, and the two wires for the start-stop switch. So we have just 4 wires for this particular track bike. If you were installing this in a street motorcycle, because the aftermarket switch only has 2 wires for the starter switch, it would leave your headlight on if you were starting your motorcycle, which is not an end of the world thing, unless of course there's something wrong with your motorcycle, but there never is, right? Next step is to remove the stock connector from the stock switch. What you have to do is, and every connector is a little bit different, there's generally a little tiny tab that you can reach inside of the switch, and you would either use a very small screwdriver, or in this case, a small pick, and push the tab out of the way, and you can pull the wire out of the switch. Of course, you've made your handy-dandy drawing before you start pulling wires out of the switch, in case things go wrong. But they're not, right? And so you just continue on, happily pulling wires out of the switch until you have if they don't come out easily, take a look again, make sure that you're working on the right part. If you can see how I'm doing this, it takes very little effort to get these out of the housing. If it's hard to get them out, you're doing it wrong. Don't want to break this because they're very hard to find. Last thing we need to do with the standard switch is identify what kind of terminal is used for the stock wiring harness and the stock connector. This is very, very important because if you use a connector that is the wrong type, it may not lock properly into the connector, and it will cause, it may come back out of the connector and cause the electrical system on your bike to fail. Bad thing. These connectors are very specialized connectors. You can't just buy them down the street at the Ace Hardware store. What you have to do is there are several specific suppliers of these type of connectors, and you can get them through your local motorcycle shop, and there are several online sources to look for these kinds of terminals. Here's a good close-up of the terminals. You can see we have to match the terminal with the stock connector. Notice this one has a completely different shape. This one looks like that's our man right there. Yes. So, once having sourced these terminals and decided which one is the correct match for your switch, now we can put this switch away and we're ready to work on the new one. This is the new switch that we will be installing on the motorcycle. So now we have to remove this connector to add this connector in there. You notice they look pretty similar, pretty close, but these will not interchange with the stock harness. They're different shapes. You cannot use the standard connector on this switch. So again, we're going to take all of the wires out. The reason that you can't use this connector is because of the really wide variety of connectors used on various motorcycles. There may very well, and it might be your motorcycle that uses this connector, but then again, the position of the wires inside the connector may be different from your motorcycle. So this is why it pays off to take your time, write down all of your wires, and make sure that you are putting this together in the correct fashion. We got lucky this time in that the terminals on this harness, on the aftermarket harness, are exactly the same as the ones that Suzuki used on this particular model of motorcycle. This is not very common, but we got lucky this time. On our drawing, the start and stop switch share one wire. So we actually are only going to need 3 wires connected into the Suzuki connector. So the two of the wires from both the start-stop switch and the starter switch will be connected together and plugged into a single place on the harness, onto the connector. So we'll actually have to cut these off and combine it into one terminal for these switches. There's a card that comes with the aftermarket switch also that has the wiring diagram of the standard switch. The most important part is which colors of wire handle the run side and which one handle the starter side. So this one, blue, white, and black is the starter, and red, black, and red, white are the run switch. Because of this, and because they are just a standard open and closed switch, we're going to join the black wire and the red and white wire together as our common. Again, because this is a track bike, the 2 brake light switch wires we don't need, so we might as well take them out of the harness just to simplify things, so it's less stuff to worry about. Save that for a little later, and very easily pull that out. Case back, cover it back together. We just simplified things. So, black and the red and white are going to be common. So we'll clip those guys off. Strip a small amount of wire. Only need about 4 millimeters. We're going to join these two together for the single terminal. Make sure you get a very solid crimp. The crimp is very important. Again, the last thing you want to do is have this terminal come off. So, this one is our common one, which goes into the second one from the back. It's a little tighter because we have 2 wires rather than just one. Let's make sure we got the right one. There we go. Okay. Now, start and stop switch is the red and black, which will go into this one. And then the starter, blue and white, goes into here. At this point, this is very simple and straightforward. It takes a little while to decode the stock switch, but putting it into the new one, pretty simple and straightforward. Let's try it on the bike. So, now that we have the switch complete, connector for the stock harness installed on the switch, first thing we want to do is just, of course, test to make sure that it all functions properly. So the switch will plug into the harness as it will normally. Turn the power on. Should hear the fuel pump or something run when you turn that one on. Yep, I heard the relays turned over. And this one has a clutch switch on it. So here, we don't want to suck the thing in there. Got to pull in the clutch. Yep, there we go, 100% functional. Just now, disconnect the switch again. We're going to reinstall it onto the handlebar, route the wire down through, and we're ready to go. Always want to just go ahead and make one more quick test, make sure that it functions correctly. Turn it on, you can hear the stuff cycle, pull the clutch in. Yep, everything's all done. Just one final thing to go over. As you can tell from what we did earlier, this is not a terribly difficult job. If you take your time, stay organized, and do your work carefully and check your work to make sure that you don't have any problems or make any mistakes, this is not a difficult job to do. But this controls a significant safety feature of your motorcycle. If something goes wrong with this, you either won't be able to turn it off if you have a problem, or it may shut off all by itself, both of them which could result in a very dangerous situation. So So make sure that you triple check your work if you're doing this yourself, and if you're not 100% sure that you can do this job right the first time, try to find someone who is an experienced professional mechanic to do this installation for you.
For more information on the products featured here, please head to our website, denniskirk.com.